monosodium glutamate, otherwise known as MSG. It's developed quite a bad reputation over the years.
That's why I've wiped it off my diet.
And I'm not the only one. Talking Point did a snap poll on Instagram. No surprises, it revealed that more than half of respondents think that MSG is bad for us. Here's why.
I think it's unhealthy.
We don't take any MSG. I think it's an artificial taste, so it shouldn't be healthy.
Having too much of it actually leads to adverse health effects like hair loss.
I actually feel quite bloated and there's a lot of water retention.
Hypertension.
I always feel thirsty after I eat MSG.
Mama say MSG is bad or good? Can you eat MSG? No. Say no.
But are our opinions on this flavor enhancer based on scientific fact or fallacy? In this episode, I'm digging deep into MSG to find out, is it really that bad for us?
A quick search online and you'll find frightening claims about MSG.
So far, I've been right to trust my gut. MSG sounds menacing.
Then there is this guy.
I ate a Big Mac, but something just felt off. I ate a McFlurry, but something just felt weird. So I added just a tad bit of MSG. So I added a bit of MSG. So I sprinkled some MSG on top.
47.7 thousand followers and over 3 million likes on TikTok. He calls himself the CEO of MSG. Ian Teddy adds MSG to everything. Perhaps you can tell me why this ingredient has such a bad rep. He's based in Taiwan, so I'm dialing him in.
Why do you love MSG so much?
In my home country, in Indonesia, we use a lot of MSG in our cookings, and it just made my food a whole lot better.
So you put it in all your dishes?
I use MSG in everything that I cook in, especially fried rice, the best combination ever.
And I'm telling you guys, it was delicious.
When I cook steak, soups, and then some desserts even, like ice cream, cake, cream cheese. Everywhere I go, I carry at least 2 containers like this. My babies.
Wait, but isn't MSG bad for us?
That's a common misconception. In the late 60s, in the US, back then, the Chinese restaurants, the main seasoning they use is MSG. So there was this one doctor, and he ate in a Chinese restaurant, and then he had these symptoms like headaches and numbness. He made research papers about MSG and then the health effects, the side effects, and then he published it. So the Chinese restaurant syndrome was coined. He just wrote based on one of his isolated experience. I mean, if the health effects that this doctor said was true, like the headaches and numbness in the necks, well then, a lot of Asians, like Chinese people, Indonesian people, will have headaches every day, but that's just not the case. Just look at me. I eat MSG a lot every day and I'm healthy.
Ian thinks the negative side effects of MSG are a hoax. He may have a point.
Because before the first symptoms were ever reported, people had been consuming MSG for decades. So just how did MSG come about?
Well, to answer that, I have to take you back to 1908 Japan. In a kitchen, a wife served her famous seaweed broth to her husband, leading to an eruption of flavors in his taste buds and a light bulb moment. And in that moment, Professor Kikunae Ikeda wanted nothing more than to replicate the savory taste of this broth. He narrowed down the key substance to glutamate naturally found in the seaweed. Through a series of chemical experiments, days of evaporating and treating the seaweed, white crystals began to form. And that is the story of how MSG was discovered.
Now, Professor Ikeda didn't just keep the discovery to himself. He created a whole industry.
I'm taking a trip.
Because I want to see for myself how this flavor enhancer is made. Up.
This is where Ajinomoto's largest Southeast Asian factory is located. The brand, as we all know, is synonymous with MSG. Meeting me is Pai Bun Kamansaran Laureate.
Hi, Pai Bun.
Nice to meet you guys.
Nice to meet you.
As an employee of Ajinomoto for 27 years, he knows the ins and outs of MSG production. He's arranged for me to try my hand at making MSG with this.
So this is the main raw material for our production. This is the fresh cassava root. After processing the cassava root, we get the tapioca starch.
So everything here is natural.
Yes. This is the simulation of MSG production process. So we start from the tapioca starch. We have to dissolve this tapioca starch into the water. So let you try.
Okay, sure. I don't
Okay.
mind trying. Okay, is this enough?
That's good. After that, stir it. So this is the starch solution.
This starch solution containing glucose then goes through a fermentation process.
In this process, just like fermentation technology as the wine, beer, or yogurt,
And then it becomes, what is this?
glutamic acid broth.
It's here where the glutamate, the G in MSG, is formed. The solution is filtered to get rid of the color.
Okay, you can get the clear solution here.
Yeah.
So we call the MSG solution. So after that, we will transfer to the crystallization process. In this process, we will separate the glutamic acid crystal from the fermented broth.
In the crystallization process, the MSG solution is heated and dried to form the concentrated glutamate we sprinkle on food.
With a name as scientific sounding as monosodium glutamate, I always thought that MSG was made by mixing chemicals and preservatives. Never would I have guessed that it's made by fermenting natural ingredients like tapioca.
But does MSG really make food taste better?
When the MSG was added to it, I just found that it just made my tongue go nuts.
And I'm about to find out if MSG is really harmful to my body. MSG has been linked to a myriad of health issues, from nausea, hair loss, heart palpitations, numbness, tingling, headaches, to thirst and dry mouth. Sounds like a death knell.
To be honest, I'm not sure where I heard it from, but I believe it. So I stay away from MSG. Meanwhile, MSG lovers think that I'm missing out on an explosion of flavors, but I'm not sure I'm convinced.
I want to know how MSG makes food taste better. To find out, I'm meeting Chef Shen Tan. As a chef of 13 years, specializing in Singaporean flavors and Asian cuisines, she knows a thing or two about this infamous flavor enhancer. And it looks like she's ready to serve up the scoop on MSG.
Hi Shen, so what do you have for me here?
So I've prepared 5 pairs of food, and I've actually added a secret ingredient to one of each of the pairs. So it'll be really interesting to see what you think of that.
And let me guess, that secret ingredient is MSG.
That's right.
So are you going to tell me which one has the MSG?
No, of course not. That would take the fun out of everything, right?
Okay, so I'm going to taste one and I identify which one tastes better.
Yeah.
I will start with ice cream. Coffee actually would be good. Orange juice. Definitely tastes like regular orange juice. I really cannot tell any difference between the two.
What do you feel like next?
I'll go for potato chips.
Alrighty.
Definitely a burst of flavor there. So let's try the soup. Wow. So with the coffee and the orange juice, I actually cannot tell which one I like better because there was almost no difference between both of them. I found that there's like way too much flavor in the chips. It just made my tongue go nuts.
Like a tingly sensation.
Yeah,
almost.
like it was just too much for me.
Turns out, the chips and soup I tasted that were bursting with flavor both contained MSG.
So what we have here is actually a representation of the 5 tastes, right? The sour, we have sweet, and then we have salty, and then bitterness with the coffee. What MSG does is actually enhances that savory flavor, that umami that everybody talks about, the 5th taste. So that's why you could tell the difference.
Why does MSG make savory food taste better?
The MSG, together with nucleotides which are found in meat products, right, like chicken, like this chicken soup, when they add together on the taste buds, right, it tells your brain this is really delicious.
MSG enhances flavor for certain foods. On sweet foods, it may not have the desired effect. But when sprinkled onto savory foods like these chips, nuts, and meats, MSG sparks a certain kind of joy on our taste buds. So far, MSG is starting to look less menacing to me. And I'm about to find out an even more shocking fact about the flavor enhancer. This is Ramesh Kumar, a health enthusiast, food scientist, and modern-day apothecary. But he isn't deterred by MSG as I'd imagined. Today, he's in my home to raid my pantry.
Are you just removing everything from my cabinet or?
So you feel any of the stuff here doesn't have MSG?
I would like to think that I don't take a lot of MSG.
We shall find out.
So Ramesh, I see you've basically emptied out my entire pantry and sorted it into 2 different kinds of piles. Why is this pile different from this one?
So we do have the processed meats, like we have sausages, ham, chips, different types of sauces, oyster sauce, chili sauce, pastas, different types of soups. So for example, this soup, they directly mention that they use monosodium glutamate, right? But if you were to look at other soups or sauces or processed meat, they will mention things like they use yeast extract or hydrolyzed yeast. Basically, they mean that they have added glutamate into it to enhance the flavor. Glutamate is a component of MSG itself.
Okay, and how about this pile of food? I mean, there's tomatoes, there's cheese, walnuts.
So these is definitely a shocking pile of food. There's definitely glutamate. For example, tomatoes or grape juice or even fruit juice, nuts and cheeses, they are naturally very high in glutamate. So these are naturally occurring glutamates.
Processed foods can contain ingredients like yeast extract, soybean extract, or flavoring, essentially another way to describe monosodium glutamate. Then we have naturally occurring glutamates in foods like cheeses, tomatoes, and nuts.
So you've got naturally occurring glutamates in tomatoes, but I also got tomato ketchup and tomato soup on this side, which have added MSG. Is there a difference between consuming either one?
So if you were to look at the molecular structure or the molecule, the glutamate that you find in fresh food like tomatoes and the glutamate that you find that is industrially made and added, the body sees it as a glutamate molecule. It doesn't differentiate. So glutamates here and the glutamate here are exactly the same.
Does that mean I have to cut all these out of my diet?
There is no need for you to cut them out completely. It is very difficult to avoid glutamate in your diet. As you can see, it's available in various types of food in our diet. It's very difficult to remove soy sauce out of our diet. It's difficult to remove cheese. Even breast milk contains glutamate. So as we grow up, we are already used to taking glutamate.
Despite my best efforts, almost everything in my pantry has glutamate, the part that gives MSG the umami flavor. It's even in breast milk. Who would have thought? About 80% of MSG is made up of glutamate. The rest is sodium, which is also part of salt. If we have been consuming glutamate all our lives, I want to know why some people swear by the side effects of taking MSG. I'm checking in with Dr. Calvin Goh. He's been practicing medicine for almost 2 decades. Dr. Calvin, so I found out that it's almost impossible to avoid glutamate. So why is it that some people complain of excessive thirst, headaches, nausea, heart palpitation when they consume MSG?
I suspect that many of the symptoms arise from other substances in the food. This food tends to be processed, oily, and they have high salt content. So the salt itself could be a more major contributory factor of these symptoms. There are some patients that do present with what we call MSG syndrome. And by a larger study done by the FDA independently in the 1990s, it shows that this occurs in a very small subgroup of patients and typically in very high doses of 3 grams. However, no one will routinely consume 3 grams of MSG. That's like taking 6 packets of instant noodles worth of MSG at a go. For individuals who are sensitive or hypersensitive to MSG, or MSG causing breathlessness or asthma attacks, these individuals should avoid MSG.
And what about hair loss?
Based on most research done, there's no strong evidence linking causality of hair loss to MSG consumption.
MSG in itself may not cause us harm, but I'm about to find out how our intake of the flavor enhancer could insidiously affect our health.
Oh, both salt and MSG.
Yeah, both. Is there something wrong with that?
I'm finding out the truth about an ingredient a lot of us, including myself, have vilified for years. And as it turns out, our fears are unfounded. But one expert thinks MSG is not completely in the clear yet.
Before I meet her, I want to see for myself how MSG is used in cooking. So I'm making a pit stop at the hawker center.
First stop, fried rice stall. In goes the oil, meats, egg, rice, MSG, and salt. Next, beef kway teow. And fried bee hoon. It's time to meet Dr. Kalpana Bhaskaran. She spent decades studying food and nutrition.
Dr. Kalpana, I've been observing how some of our food is prepared, so I wanted to show you some footage that I actually got, and maybe you can let me know what you think.
Oh, both salt and MSG.
Yeah, both. Is there something wrong with that?
Yeah, definitely, because see, both have sodium. When you look at the quantity of sodium which has gone into this, half a teaspoon of salt has around 1000 milligrams of sodium, and half a teaspoon of MSG is having around 700. So this fried rice alone will have around 1,700 milligrams of sodium.
Wow, that's almost my daily intake.
Yes, because we always reiterate,
Yeah.
keep your daily intake less than 2,000 milligrams of sodium.
So how can I use my MSG better?
Okay, the best way is try to flavor your foods naturally with your herbs and spices. But at the same time, if you still feel, oh, something is lacking, you feel that lack of taste or that umami taste and so on, then use, instead of 1 teaspoon of salt, if I use 1 teaspoon of MSG, when you take salt, 1 teaspoon has around 2,000 milligrams. MSG gives around 700 milligrams of sodium. Weight for weight, MSG has only 1/3 of the sodium content.
So like that I can actually pull back on my sodium intake and also
Yes.
still have a little bit of that umami flavor as
Yes.
well. Does that mean that MSG is a good substitute for salt?
MSG is one of the substitutes for salt, but when you look at MSG, as per European Food Safety Authority, the amounts allowed for MSG is 30 milligrams per kilogram body weight.
Okay.
May I know what is your body weight?
I'm about 70 kg.
So when you take that into account, so 70 times 30 milligrams, that will be around 2,100, right? Per 2,100 milligrams, which is around 2.1 grams of MSG. That is your daily acceptable limit per day.
In a battle of flavor enhancers, MSG is a lesser evil compared to salt, at least when it comes to sodium content.
I started this investigation convinced that MSG is harmful to my health. So I gave MSG a second look, or taste. Turns out a lot of it was hearsay. Boycotting MSG is not necessary because it's not bad for us, as long as we keep the sodium part of monosodium glutamate in check. That means reducing the amount of salt in my food whenever I'm adding MSG to it too.